By 1944, German prisoners of war in American camps were mailing food packages home to their starving families. 11 million parcels over the course of the captivity. Chocolate bars, instant coffee, canned meat, sent from behind barbed wire in Tennessee and Texas and Alabama to apartments in Berlin and farmhouses in Bavaria. From captivity to freedom. And the captivity had better food. My name is Harold Evers. I'm 93 years old. I served with the 508th Military Police Escort Guard Company, United States Army. For the better part of 2 years, my job was watching German prisoners of war on American soil. And I watched it happen. I want to tell you about a carpenter from Mannheim named Heinrich Maier. He'd fought across the Sahara for 2 years with the Afrika Korps. Hard man, proud man. One August evening in a prison camp in Tennessee, he pooled his wages with 5 other prisoners to buy every flavour of ice cream the canteen carried. Chocolate, vanilla, strawberry, butter pecan. They lined the cups on a table and just looked at them. Then Maier said something in German that another prisoner translated for me. My daughter is 6 years old. She has never tasted ice cream. I am a prisoner and I can choose between 4 flavours. He ate the strawberry first, slowly, like he was memorising it. That moment, and 1,000 others like it, is what I want to tell you about this afternoon. How this country defeated an ideology, not with artillery or air power, but with Coca-Cola and ice cream on the 4th of July. I know how that sounds, but I was there. I was 20 years old the summer it started, stationed at Camp Crossville, Tennessee. And over the next 2 years, I watched 371,000 German prisoners confront a reality that contradicted everything they'd been told about American weakness. Stay with me. This one matters. To understand what I witnessed, you need to go back to May 1943, Tunisia. The Afrika Korps surrendered, and roughly 250,000 German and Italian soldiers came into Allied captivity. These were Rommel's desert veterans, men who had pushed the British back to Egypt, tough, proud soldiers who fully expected to be starved as prisoners. Instead, the Americans fed them better than their own army had. Within hours of surrender, the prisoners received American K-rations. Now, GIs hated K-rations, complained about them like they were being punished. But to men who had survived on hard biscuits and bitter ersatz coffee for 2 years, those field rations contained treasures. Crackers, processed cheese, candy, fruit bars, real coffee with real sugar, cigarettes. Perspective is a powerful thing. At processing camps in North Africa, military records show the army served pancakes with syrup, fresh eggs, and milk. Foods that had vanished from German military rations years earlier. Nobody understood at the time that they were loading a psychological weapon, but they were. The Liberty ships that carried prisoners across the Atlantic delivered the next lesson. Mass-produced at a pace German shipbuilders couldn't fathom, one completed every 42 hours. Rations matched crew provisions, 3,500 calories a day, including fresh bread, meat, vegetables, and coffee with real sugar. The ships had refrigeration as standard equipment. German vessels didn't. Here was a transport ship keeping lettuce crisp in the middle of the ocean. But the detail prisoners repeated most, the one I heard over and over during my years as a guard, was this: ice cream was served during Atlantic crossings. Ship logs from July 1943 record serving it to prisoners on Independence Day. A former postal clerk from Düsseldorf named Karl Friedrich Nagel, who'd served as a radio operator with the 21st Panzer Division, told me at a reunion decades later that the moment he tasted that frozen dessert in the middle of the Atlantic, the world he believed in collapsed. He said the new one tasted like vanilla. I met Nagel when he was 70. He had travelled from Germany to Tennessee specifically to stand in the place where he had been a prisoner. He walked the grounds where the barracks had been, now an open field, and told me the story, standing where the canteen once stood. He said he'd told it to his children and grandchildren, and they never believed him. Ice cream on a ship in the Atlantic. He said coming back was the only way to prove to himself it had happened. When the ships docked at Norfolk, the prisoners stepped onto soil that Nazi propaganda had declared couldn't exist. The naval base handled more cargo daily than major German ports managed weekly. At port exchanges, prisoners saw shelves stocked with candy bars, 5 cents each, same price everywhere, no officer's discount, no party member privilege. 5 cents for a private, 5 cents for a prisoner. The train journey inland deepened the shock. Unlike Europe's cattle cars, prisoners travelled in passenger coaches with dining cars. They looked out the windows at farmland stretching to the horizon, civilian automobiles on every road. Not military vehicles, but family cars driven by women and teenagers and old men. Towns with full shop windows. Filling stations with Coca-Cola coolers sitting right out front, unguarded for anyone. And they understood this wasn't special treatment. This was just how the country ran. Camp Crossville, where I served, was typical. Electric lights, hot water, flush toilets, heated barracks. But the Camp Exchange, the PX, that's where I stood guard day after day, watching worldviews fall apart. The exchanges stocked Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Dr. Pepper, RC Cola, candy bars, ice cream, cigarettes, fresh fruit, beer. Prisoners earned 80 cents a day for labour. At 5 cents per item, a day's wage bought 16 bottles of soda. The Coca-Cola Company produced 5 billion bottles in 1943. 5 billion. Nobody in America thought twice about it. I watched a guard named Corporal James Dalton, 24, from Macon, Georgia, drink half a bottle and walk away, forgetting it on a fence post. A prisoner stared at that abandoned bottle for a full minute. In his world, you did not leave half of anything. The idea that a drink could be so common that a man would forget about it mid-swallow, no lecture or pamphlet could produce that kind of revelation. The standardization stunned them too. The drink tasted identical in Maine and Texas. That consistency, syrup manufactured in Atlanta and distributed to hundreds of bottling plants nationwide, that was industrial coordination the Nazi state had insisted Americans were incapable of achieving. The chaos and decadence Goebbels described was actually a system so efficient it could make a luxury beverage taste exactly the same across 3,000 miles. Turns out the decadent nation just had better logistics. Sugar told the real story, and this is where the contrast gets hard to sit with. In Germany, civilians received about 10 ounces of sugar a month, when they could get it at all. A cup of sugar, maybe a bit more, to last 30 days. In American prison camps, sugar sat in open bowls on mess hall tables, unlimited, unguarded, for enemies. I watched it every day. The first week, prisoners took a careful spoonful for their coffee, the way you handle something precious. The second week, they spooned it over oatmeal, testing the limits. By the third week, they understood. The bowls would always be refilled. One incident from Camp Aliceville, Alabama, in the summer of 1943. Humid weather hardened several hundred pounds of sugar. A kitchen supervisor ordered it thrown out and requisitioned fresh supplies. A German pastry chef named Franz Lehmann, working the kitchen detail, sat down on a crate and put his head in his hands. Several hundred pounds, discarded. His family was counting grains at home. As prisoners picked up enough English to read American publications, they found numbers that made what they'd seen in camp look modest. American sugar output in 1944, 7 million tons. Chocolate for the military alone, 380 million pounds. Over 500 million gallons of ice cream. And then a prisoner named Eric Pfeiffer translated an American newspaper editorial for his barracks. It complained about the hardship of sugar rationing, £2 per person per month. The prisoners listened in silence. £2, more than triple the German allowance. And then Pfeiffer laughed, and then everyone laughed. The darkest laughter I ever heard. Because they weren't laughing at the Americans, they were laughing at themselves, at their own nation, at the lie they had marched for. Thanksgiving 1943 was when something broke at Crossville. Not violently, quietly, like a structure that had been cracking for months, finally settling into rubble. This was a purely American holiday the prisoners had never heard of. Army records confirm all camps served traditional Thanksgiving dinner that year. Roast turkey with stuffing, mashed potatoes, gravy, sweet potatoes, cranberry sauce, vegetables, pumpkin pie, coffee and milk. Consider the logistics. Turkey dinners served simultaneously to 425,000 prisoners of war, millions of American servicemen worldwide, and the entire civilian population, the same meal on the same day, across a continent and half the globe. That wasn't just farming. That was organizational power so deep it could coordinate a feast for its enemies while feeding its own army and citizens without anyone going short. And the fact that German prisoners received the identical meal as American soldiers, that directly contradicted Nazi racial hierarchy. In Nazi ideology, Americans were mongrels, a mixed race incapable of true national purpose. Yet here was the mongrel nation serving identical turkey to everyone. And the turkey was better than anything the German army had provided in years. A prisoner named Siegfried Enulat, a mathematics teacher from Braunschweig, sat in the mess hall and calculated the tonnage in his head. He set his fork down and said to the man beside him, "This war was over before it started. We just didn't know it." And the career soldier next to him, wounded twice in Africa, looked at the line of prisoners still waiting for turkey, looked at the mess sergeant refilling gravy, and answered, "The question is not whether we lost. The question is what we lost to." Christmas cut deeper. American civilians, ordinary people, church groups, individuals whose sons and brothers were fighting and dying against Germany, sent Christmas packages to enemy prisoners of war. The American Friends Service Committee alone distributed 50,000 parcels, homemade cookies, candy, toiletries, writing materials. In Crossville, a woman named Mrs. Ruth Henley, whose husband ran the hardware store and whose brother served in Italy, brought 3 trays of gingerbread to the camp gate on Christmas Eve. I asked Mrs. Henley, years later, why she did it. She looked at me like I'd asked a foolish question. She said, "Harold, they were boys, far from home, at Christmas. What else was I going to do?" She said it the way you'd explain why you water a plant. That moral clarity, unself-conscious and absolute, was something the prisoners had no way to make sense of. In Nazi Germany, kindness to enemies was treason. In Crossville, Tennessee, it was just what decent people did without thinking about it. By 1944, 100,000 prisoners worked outside the camps, and what they saw finished what the canteen had started. In Michigan, they picked cherries destined for maraschino production, tons of fruit grown for garnish. Think about that. In Germany, fruit was survival food, counted and rationed. In America, entire orchards existed to produce decorations for Sundays. When minimum security prisoners ate at American diners under guard, they saw that abundance made personal. Hamburger, 25 cents. Coca-Cola, 5 cents. Pie, 15 cents. A factory worker and a bank president on adjacent counter stools, served by the same waitress, paying the same price. One of the German officers told me the American diner was the most politically radical thing he'd ever seen. more radical than any ideology. A place where everyone was equal at the counter, and the proof was on the plate. A dairy farmer named Otto Brandt, who'd been captured in Tunisia, was assigned near an elementary school. He watched American children receive hot lunches every day, fresh milk delivered to thousands of schools as routine. One afternoon, he saw a boy of about 8 throw away half an ice cream cone because the bell rang and he had to go back to class. The boy didn't look back, didn't hesitate. Half a cone in the trash like it was nothing. Brandt told me, through a translator, his hand shaking slightly, that the melting cone in the garbage defeated him more completely than the entire 8th Army had in North Africa. Now I should say, and this is something that sat uneasy with me even then, these German prisoners in the South had freedoms that not every American enjoyed equally. They ate in diners and worked alongside civilians in communities where Black Americans faced restrictions those German soldiers never did. The country that showed such generosity to its enemies still had deep injustices of its own to reckon with. Both things were true at the same time. And if this story teaches anything, it's that you have to be honest about all of it. Spring 1945 delivered the final blow. Prisoners watched newsreels of American GIs distributing chocolate to German children. Their children, or children who could have been theirs, reaching up to American soldiers for candy their own government couldn't provide. American soldiers advancing through enemy territory, carrying enough sweets to give away, while the German state that promised triumph delivered starvation. And then the concentration camp footage. Bergen-Belsen, Dachau, Buchenwald. Skeletal survivors being given K-rations by weeping GIs. I stood at the back of the camp theatre and watched faces I had known for 2 years collapse into something I had never seen. Not shame exactly, something deeper, recognition. A prisoner named Hans Vollmer, a former hotel manager from Munich, left the theatre and didn't speak for 3 hours. A guard who'd grown up on a tobacco farm outside Crossville told me Vollmer sat on the barrack steps, staring at the ground until the dinner bell. Like a clock that had stopped, he said. Everything still ticking inside, but nothing moving on the outside. When I spoke to Vollmer years later, he confirmed it. He said the newsreels broke something that the soft drinks and the candy and the turkey dinners had been loosening for 2 years. He said, I went into that theatre a prisoner who was beginning to doubt. I came out a man who knew. The regime that promised glory had produced skeletons. The nation that was supposed to be weak was feeding those skeletons back to life. And the prisoners understood that generosity wasn't random. The nation handing K-rations to concentration camp survivors was the same nation that had given them ice cream on the 4th of July. It was built into the way America operated. Between 1945 and 1946, the men I'd watched transform went home. Many had gained weight in American captivity. Their families had lost weight to starvation. Think about that reunion. A father returns from enemy imprisonment looking healthier than when he left. His wife is thinner. His children are thinner. Everyone in Germany is thinner, except the men who spent the war behind American wire. You couldn't argue with the weight on a man's frame. Many brought final Red Cross packages home. Chocolate, coffee, canned goods that became family treasures. Children who had forgotten the taste of chocolate received Hershey bars from fathers who had eaten frozen desserts regularly in American camps. Some families didn't believe the stories. Lehman's wife accused him of exaggerating. Brandt's brother, who had spent 2 years in Soviet captivity, where prisoners died by the thousands, refused to speak to him for 6 months. The contrast between American and Soviet treatment was itself a lesson. The same war, the same enemy, cruelty from one victor, ice cream from another. But the returning prisoners became unexpected advocates. They had witnessed American prosperity firsthand, And they understood it wasn't zero-sum. American wealth came from production, not conquest. The Americans didn't have ice cream because they took it from someone else. They had it because they built the farms and factories to produce 500 million gallons a year. When the Marshall Plan was debated in German communities, former prisoners stood in town halls and churches and said, "I lived in their country. I ate their food. They have enough to share. They're not trying to conquer us. They're trying to rebuild us because they can afford to. And that's how they think." Enulat, the math teacher, became an economic planner in Lower Saxony. He told an interviewer that every logistics problem he solved in post-war Germany, he solved by remembering how Coca-Cola got from Atlanta to a camp in Tennessee without varying in taste. His daughter sent me a notebook he kept during captivity after he passed. 2 columns on every page, USA and Deutschland. The American column was dense with figures. The German column was mostly blank. On the last page, 1 sentence in German. "I have been a mathematician my whole life, and I have never seen an equation so unbalanced." Lehman opened his bakery in Stuttgart with frosting an inch thick and kept a 100-pound bag of sugar in the shop window for the first year. A monument, he called it. He didn't say to what. Nagel returned to Düsseldorf and opened one of the city's first American-style soda fountains in 1955. He hung a photograph of a Liberty ship above the counter. When customers asked, he told them about the ice cream. The same story, the same pause in the same place, served with a scoop of vanilla. He died in 1998. His granddaughter told me the cafe is still there, run by someone else now, but the Liberty ship photograph remains on the wall. Nobody who works there knows why. I'm 93. Most of the men I guarded are gone. Crossville is a memory held by fewer people each year. But the story matters because it reminds us that strength and generosity aren't opposites, that you can defeat an enemy's ideas more thoroughly with a nickel Coca-Cola than with a 1,000-pound bomb. I keep telling it because the men who lived it deserve to be remembered. On both sides of that wire, Mrs. Henley with her gingerbread, Corporal Dalton walking away from a half-finished bottle, Lehman on the crate with his head in his hands, Enulat setting down his fork on Thanksgiving, Maier eating strawberry ice cream slowly enough to memorize it, Brandt staring at a trash can where a child threw away half a cone. These men saw the truth and accepted it. That's its own kind of bravery, the courage to be wrong. This channel is where stories like this get told before there's no one left to tell them. If they matter to you, subscribe and turn on notifications. Leave me a comment. Tell me what surprised you most. Or, if your father or grandfather served, tell me something they told you. I'd like to hear it. Press that like button. It helps more people find these stories, and they deserve to be found. Thank you for sitting with me. There are more to come.